All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the one meeting each year after town meeting after the town election where I have the honor of calling the meeting to order and presiding until a chair is voted in. And I will then promptly hand the meeting back to the chair to oversee the election of a vice chair and the remaining business of the committee. I'd like to note that this meeting is being televised and recorded thanks to the efforts of Westborough TV. And now, for those who are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I open this up, I want to congratulate Sarah and Yakub for being reelected to the school committee, and thank you for your service to the community. I think this is a lot of work. People may not realize how much work it is, not having seen behind the scenes, and it's just been a pleasure working with you both, and I'm thrilled that you're committing to serving another term with us here, and it's so clear to me that you're here as advocates for students and families of Westborough, so thank you for that. And at this time, I'd like to call for nominations for the role of chair.
I'd like to move that Yakub be the next chair of the school committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Well, I guess as is the convention of the school committee as well as the board of selectmen, that in fact the chair is rotated generally annually, and that has been the case in my history on the school committee. The purpose being is that members of the school committee in serving as chair have a much stronger background in regards to all the things that happen, of which many happen in the background. Town meeting, for example, preparation, discussions with other parts of the town, interfaces with different members of the school department. And so I think as a result of that convention, that's the background behind my wish to see that Yakub is elected as chair.
I'll just make a comment too. So I think what we need to talk about in the future is I don't think that it serves the district to be changing the chair position year after year. I do think we should talk about, multiple year terms, maybe 2 years, depending on the ability for the person to do it. I think that for the administration, there's a period of training. There's a lot of different things that have to change over time. And I just think it's not efficient to do it this way. Of course, if you have a chair that's unable to serve the 2-year term or whatever term that gets decided in the future, I understand that. But I do think that it's, an unnecessary burden for the administration. And also, I think that it's less, about us having the opportunity to be chair and more about the chair being able to manage things and interface with the other side, which is the town and everything else. So that's just an opinion. I think we should talk about that in the future, about potentially, making the chair position a 2-year position, because I think that will serve our district much better.
I would point out that you can't do that. And the reason why is that any given year, the majority can change. And in fact, whatever quote the policy was before can be changed. So
I don't know if there is a policy.
I just said, if you have the votes, you have what you need, whether it's 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, or otherwise.
Right. So I think that if there was a proposal to try and have a 2-year term, I don't think that that's not something we can do. It may get, if the composition of the committee changes, that could be subject to that. But I do think that for the continuity and relationship with the administration, especially just based on my experience that I've had, there's a certain momentum you gain, and it takes time to get there. And I think in order to serve our district, it's good to continue that for some period of time. So,
well, given that policy, I could still be chair for 5 years.
no, I think we talked about just 2 years is what I'm saying.
No, we didn't. We haven't talked about it at all, and it needs to be talked about here as a committee, not between individuals.
Exactly, that's what I'm
But
saying.
at any
too.
rate, there is a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure if there's anyone else who has anything they want to add to the discussion before I call for a vote. Okay. Great. All right, I'll call for a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. So I think at this point, I don't know if we need to move chairs around or anything like that, or you can stay where you are for this meeting.
Before we do that, I mean,
Sure.
just add, well, thank you very much for this vote. Thank you, Sarah, for your year serving as the chair of the committee. I promise I'll do my best to serve this assembly as well as I can and serve our committee and our community. Thank you for this vote, and I'd like to appoint Tim as my vice chair. So that'll be my motion. I'm appointing Tim. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
500. Thank you. So now we can rearrange. Okay, back to the agenda. The first item is the superintendent update.
Got a couple of quick items here that are not listed, but I wanted to share them with you just because they're responsive to things that we've talked about. And I'll send this along in email. This just came to me today, so sort of late breaking. We had talked in our last meeting about getting a little more insider information about what the role of the collaboratives is, kind of what they do and how they do it. And it just so happened today, I was at the Accept board meeting, and they're having an open house to which school committee members are invited. So if you're interested, that will be on April 17th in the middle of the day, and I'll send along the invite to you. But it's an opportunity to sort of see one of the two programs that we're connected to, which is kind of a great opportunity. I wanted to spotlight this wonderful bit of good news about a student as well. So the student in question is, I'm going to make sure I pronounce his name correctly, Sid Suratwala, and he is a student at the Borough. And as part of a program, his artwork was featured on the actual program for this year's MDDC and ARC of Massachusetts Advocacy Day at the State House. So they have a legislative reception there. And if you see on the left, you can see his original artwork in hand. And on the right, it's actually incorporated into the program for the whole kit and caboodle. And it's an incredible honor. I'm really glad that we got to have one of our own very talented members of the Borough program sort of spotlighted in this opportunity. His parents are really proud. Everybody knows I'm sharing his photo up here too, so they were happy about that. Kind of on to the official stuff on the agenda. I wanted to give you a few notes about where we are with implementation for K-3 redistricting. First off, over the past week or two since we met and the vote happened, we've done a few important things. One is some verification. We met with together the K-3 principals, Scott Henderson, who's our data architect, and Cindy Crowley, the bus coordinator, went through and really looked at all the kind of exact boundaries in the map to make sure we've got the right families that were on all the right lists. So we didn't want to have the situation where the buses had one list and our internal data was something else. So we did that work together. We did some outreach to the entire K-3 community, pre-K-3 community, with a memo, with a message today, and then that was followed very quickly by a message from Fales principal Marianne Stannard welcoming just the new families to Fales. We've launched kindergarten registration. We shortened the timeline a little bit. It's still a very reasonable timeline. It's a month and with a little bit of wiggle room to get folks in, but we think that'll help move us along and allow us to better understand what we need to do in terms of staffing as we make that shift. And then we also, at the end of the week last week, launched a staff survey to sort of determine if there are staff members out there who are interested in making the move and volunteering to move from Armstrong or Hastings to Fales. We did include Mill Pond as well, figuring the licensure is the same. So if there are folks who had that interest in changing grade levels, we may see some shuffling around in the K-6 realm. So The kind of next phase that we'll kick into is really about principals working with individual families and us working behind the scenes around the staffing and structures. So there'll be a lot happening this spring that's sort of quietly planning. And some of that will also be outreach to individual families who may need more support than a sort of the typical transition activities. Finally, in the late spring, we're really hoping to launch some kind of transition type events. So events at Fails, there's a step-up day that typically happens at all the schools. The principals have talked about how to make that really inclusive so that the Fails kids get to go step up at Fails and be with their new classmates and have that experience. And those kinds of things will kind of continue into the summer so that there are opportunities in the summer as well. We realize it's a big change for folks. We want to make sure everybody feels very, very, very welcomed. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. And that is it from my initial report. I'm going to hand it off to Matt now, who has a couple updates about literacy and about wellness.
Great, thank you. As Allison said, I'm here to give you an update on 2 district level and actually community level committees that we have ongoing this year. And note that they will be coming later this spring to give formal presentations so that you'll get much more in depth, but I figured an update is helpful. First one is on our K-3 Literacy Steering Committee. So we formed this committee to guide our transition to a fully evidence-based early literacy instruction, and we'll be making recommendations for curriculum adoption, professional learning, as well as assessment practices. This committee is co-chaired by our 2 literacy coordinators, Aubrey Zittman and Stephanie Nephew. The committee is composed of 31 Westborough public school educators representing elementary school classroom teachers, literacy specialists, curriculum coordinators, special educators, ELL teachers, as well as administrators. We met just a couple weeks ago. We have another meeting coming up in March, in April, and in May. And as I said, the plan is to create, it's going to be a multi-year committee. We'll be working over the summer and into the fall. We anticipate it continuing for about the next 24 months, if not more, to align with district goals and priorities, review existing curriculum programs out there using some resources from DESE, notably this website called Curate, where they rate curriculum programs, and then doing site visits, exploring curriculum resources, determine recommendations and timelines for implementation. And as I said, I think we're gonna have a formal presentation for you on May 27th. Secondarily, we have a update on the Wellness Committee, and we formed a Wellness Committee for the 25-26 school year. This is a very large committee composed of teachers, parents, nurses, counselors, food service staff, students, community members, who are all working together to support the wellness and health of our entire school committee, but with a focus on students. The goal is to improve the health and well-being of students, and specifically to update our district wellness policy, which is very out of date. So our goal is to make that current with state regulations as well as changes in law, and just to bring it up to date. We have partnered with a couple organizations. One is called Mass Wellness. They have a coaching program, and we want to meet the requirements of the USDA local wellness policy implementation, as well as the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010. We are, as I said, we're working with a consultant, and she is with the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. And what she's doing is going line by line, working in close collaboration with a subcommittee of the Wellness Committee, and looking at our existing policy, making recommendations, and then we brought that back to the Wellness Committee for feedback. We're incorporating those changes. It's this iterative process, and then are going back to the consultant. After that work is all done, we will share our draft wellness policy with DESE to get DESE's feedback. And then we expect to share it with you at the June 10th meeting. So you'll have a fully vetted and articulated wellness policy that's up to date. as I said, we're meeting. We have 4 meetings. We met in December, February, and a couple meetings actually in February. And then the next formal meeting will be late spring in June. And we're using this Massachusetts local wellness policy strength assessment to take a look at where our current policy needs work, is strong, and we're using that feedback to really beef it up. But more broadly, the wellness committee will continue to meet. The focus this year is on the policy, but after that's been brought for your approval, the committee will continue to meet, and we expect to meet 4 times a year and then focus on student wellness more broadly. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments?
Thanks for that update. So is the wellness policy something we need to vote on? So
Correct.
would we be voting on it at the June 17th meeting? Okay, so I think it would be really helpful if we had it before it, just because I think that would be
Sure.
the end of the year. And if we need it voted on, right,
Yes.
we would
Yeah.
need it probably, I don't know if we want to have it the meeting before,
I would suggest.
so that then we can
So you
vote on
can-
it.
so you
Yeah.
have a
Just so
month
it's voted
yeah.
on by the end of the our time. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then the only other question I had was the literacy committee, or literacy steering committee, right? What grade levels does that
Oh, good.
cover?
Thank you. Good question. I think I omitted that. So one of the reasons we formed this literacy steering committee is there is pending legislation in Boston right now to introduce a requirement for all public schools to have a evidence-based curriculum to focus on literacy in grades K through 3. So our focus is on that specific grade span. However, members of the committee include Mill Pond, literacy specialists. It's a pretty broad, it expands that because want to make sure there's kind of cohesion as students move on to grades 4, 5, and 6.
Great, thanks.
You're
I have a
welcome.
comment too. Actually, Matt, I was wondering, is there an opportunity for us prior to having to vote on it to have Roger come in and give more detailed?
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I should have made it public. Sarah serves on the wellness committee. Roger Anderson is co-chairing the wellness committee as well. Yeah, we can schedule a presentation and then
really helpful.
bring it to your kind of formal attention. So happy to do that in either late May. I think the next meeting is May 27th. Or is there one on the 2nd?
Should be.
We've got a couple meetings in May.
Yeah.
We'll figure out a time to get it on the calendar. For
Great.
Tim?
Yeah. And then, Matt, can I quickly ask? I know you said it was roughly around 20 months at a minimum, probably for the literacy. Is that in part because the legislation is still pending on Beacon Hill, or can you speak a little bit to why the long timeline?
Yeah, so we're following best practices for really a curriculum review process. We're mindful of what's happening in Beacon Hill. Just so people are aware, there's currently 2 pieces of legislation or 2 bills going through the House and the Senate, and right now I guess they're in the reconciliation component. We're watching that, but at the same time, this curriculum review process is really about Westborough and making sure that we have the curriculum that meets the needs of the students that we serve. And that is a multi-phase, multi-year process. So we start with, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the formal presentation, but it starts with looking inward and then looking outward, looking at other schools, doing site visits, doing a thorough curriculum review with a rubric, and then doing pilots of curriculum, getting feedback, and we would anticipate this work starting really in depth. Well, we're starting now, but gathering the resources, looking at the financial implications, thinking about the professional development. It really would continue into the next 2 school years.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. One more question for me about the literacy committee. I'm just curious, is this something that the district or other districts do on a recurring basis? Is this ad hoc based on the need?
So my understanding is that there was a pretty comprehensive literacy review in Westborough not too long ago. I want to say
Correct.
2020, right around the pandemic time, and it continued. One thing, and Allison and I have talked about it, is to have a set calendar of schedules for comprehensive curriculum reviews. We can't review all of our curriculum all at the same time, but if we're thoughtful in terms of the sequence and we map it out, and I do have some rough drafts that I could share perhaps at a future meeting, because it's similar to, you know, like school building projects. We can't do them all at the same time, but you want to be thoughtful about priorities. And I will say that when the legislature started to really take a look at this, we didn't want to be behind the law and then have to scramble. So we formed this committee to navigate it. At the same time, we want to do what's best for the students here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Allison, I think you just have one more item, the EV
Sure,
charger.
yes, absolutely. And I am pleased to invite Layla Ahmed, who is our new sustainability coordinator in Westborough and a Westborough High School graduate, which is really exciting to have her here, to kind of walk us through information that she pulled together about EV charging in and around Westborough, but specifically opportunities to consider what it would look like to add charging stations on the school sites. So. That's on, oh, there we go. Point it kind of toward me because it's off my computer. There you go. Okay. I was gonna say I might have to Vanna White it for you. So if it gets stuck, just let me know and I'll do the honors. Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. So nice to meet you all. My name is Lila Ahmed. I'm the sustainability coordinator for the town. And thank you all for having me this evening. I'll be presenting on the charging station deployment roadmap that was completed this past fall. Just to give some helpful background on this grant and this roadmap, my predecessor, Ben Bowers, had worked on applying for this grant for $50,000 from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources in order to help develop an EV charging station deployment roadmap for the town. He worked with Power Options to write up this proposal, as well as working with different town staff, school facilities, and Sustainable Westborough members. And when I joined this fall, I was also helping to finish closing out this grant and some of the last minute edits. But really the overall goal of this grant was to help make a thoughtful and strategic roadmap in order to plan for future EV charging locations around town. This site inventory of this entire roadmap consisted of 30 different sites. There were 13 municipal sites, 8 school sites, and 9 commercial sites. And also just to make clear that this roadmap in no way commits us to installing these chargers right away. Instead, it's just giving us some type of prioritized map for future usage whenever the school committee or other town staff choose to use it. So here on this page, it's a little small, but there's a map of all the different school locations. And we also have a school bus depot highlighted at the top in the yellow portion of the in the region up there. Some things to point out here are the green stars, which are really small, but those are what are considered to be a high priority site, and the red stars are what are to be considered a low priority site. And I'll talk in later slides of how those priorities were decided and everything. And then the yellow and green shaded regions represent the different environmental justice blocks of Westborough. Yellow is for the minority, and the green is for minority and income. And that's important to point out just because those regions, which Hastings falls into, would receive more funding from National Grid, more incentive funding, because they are in an EJC community. Here is a map of the municipal and school site summary. I wanted to include this in the slide so you can see that the schools are a part of this study that had a bunch of other sites included in it. It wasn't prioritized just with the schools. So we have some municipal sites, different public parking lots, and what's not included in this was also 9 commercial sites as well. I did have a separate table with those. But just to highlight, these are the schools on the site categorized from high, medium, and low. And then here we can just focus just on the school site summary. So this table here is just focusing on the schools. We see there's high and low, and just to kind of give some background on how these priorities were given to them. Power options at first just categorized plainly based on cost. That's how they got high and low and medium. And then by further conversations with everyone involved in these meetings, we discussed, gave more feedback, since Power Options is not from Westborough, on ideas we had and thoughts we had. School facilities were involved in these meetings. Like I said, community development, sustainable Westborough people. I joined later on. And we also considered like realistic timelines and the feasibility of some of these sites. For example, if we saw a site that was non-urgent and relatively expensive, we decided, that makes sense to have it there as a low priority on the map. It's also important to point out that these classifications came from the preliminary study, and if any of these sites seen by the school committee you might disagree with or see that a low priority site might be recategorized as a high priority site, that's very valuable feedback, and this is not to say that you can't approach one site over another. It's just how the roadmap was completed. So funding opportunities, very important. How are we getting money to pay for some of these things? So the two main funding sources available for EV chargers are the Massachusetts Electrical Vehicle Incentive Program, otherwise known as Mass EVIP. There's also the National Grid EV Charging Program. So what the Mass EVIP program offers, it's a state program that provides grants to offset EV charger purchase and installation costs. And the National Grid EV charging program helps more with the utility incentive. It supports the infrastructure and electrical upgrades needed for installation of the chargers, and this can normally be some of the more expensive costs that come with the chargers. One helpful aspect also to point out about these funding options is that you can combine them, you can stack them, so that can help to further reduce the overall upfront cost. So it's not one or the other. You can use both at the same time. So in this presentation, I highlighted just 2 sites, but that wasn't to say that all the other sites and for the schools were not important. I just didn't want to take up so much time going over every site in detail. They're all laid out in the packet that was emailed out prior. So if anyone has questions about those and specific details, they're all in there as well. I chose the high school in Hastings to speak about, mainly based on location and accessibility and price, the cheapest options that was listed for schools. So Hastings, we see here, that was listed as a high priority on the roadmap. Located in an EJC status, it has a very overall cheap net cost for the town. On the right is the location of the proposed EV charging sites. So like when you drive into the parking lot, on your right around the corner is where the proposed sites would be. And Power Options had proposed installing 2 stations, which would both be level 2 chargers with 4 ports. If something about the Mass EVIP program is it does require that you add 1 spot that's ADA compliant, just meaning that it's wide enough to fit an ADA vehicle. It does not mean that only ADA vehicles could use that spot. It just has to be wide enough and have proper striping on the outside to allow for wheelchair access or anything like that. We can see the total cost estimate for Hastings comes up to $72,508. And then the Mass EVIP grants and National Grid incentive amounts are listed there as well, with an overall net cost for the town of approximately $1,000. Now, I will strongly note that these funding amounts are estimates and likely will change, as this was a preliminary report. And I also want to add, which we hadn't found this out, but when I was making the slides, Sustainable Westborough is trying to get more information on municipal sites as well. So we went ahead to get more updated incentives for some town sites on our end, using Energy Source to give us those updated cost amounts. Since the study was done a little bit ago, it was outdated numbers. And unfortunately, what we did find, we got the money, the proposals back. The net costs are are almost double what's listed here. So just take that into account as well, that the net costs will most likely be more expensive if you were to rescope and get those information. But it was helpful to still understand that better now. So the second location I chose to prioritize was the Westborough High School. It was also listed as a high priority by Power Options due to its high usage potential with a lot of space, a lot of parking spots. It does get a lot of people coming for different sporting events during the spring and the fall, different town events, town meetings, voting. And I know during the summer we use it to park and use the track and play tennis, or park and just walk around downtown on a nice night. Those on the right, you can see where the chargers were proposed to be installed, right by the tennis courts in the lower parking lot. This was only one station with 2 ports, so 2 cars could charge at once. And again, they were both a level 2 charger. And like Hastings, we would have to have one ADA compliant spot installed there. The total cost estimate comes up to be $61,142. And for this site, only Mass EVIP grant was estimated initially by Power Options, but that isn't to say that if we were to get an updated proposal that it's possible there would also be National Grid incentive estimates for that. And the total net cost for the town at the time this was done was $11,100. And again, these funding amounts are estimates, so they are likely to change. So that was a lot of upfront costs, but I know it's important to think about how long, the long-term operational costs, what does that look like? And because we only have one public charging station in town at the golf course, I thought I'd kind of inform you of some of the information we found from that, as that could be useful when we're thinking about implementing more chargers here in town. So at the Westborough golf course, we have 2 chargers, both level 2. And they're charging residents right now approximately 29 cents per kilowatt. I've spoken with town facilities, Jim Stewart, to get some more of this information, and he's the one who oversees that charger there. And what he's told me is the revenue they're getting from people plugging in to charge, they're able to fully cover electricity and routine maintenance. So in other words, they're breaking even with those costs. And the chart down below, Jeff Levine, Vice Chair of Sustainable Westborough, made this in a presentation to our committee to sort of explain to us the changes from 2023 all the way to 2025 in terms of revenue. And we can see in green, it is going up and more people are most likely using it. It does probably take time for people to get in the routine of going to these different locations. But something else to note about the people using that charging station is that 60% of those people are Westborough residents and 40% of them are from other towns, which is a benefit to us because we are getting that revenue and that is helping with the costs. And the average time that we found people are spending at the golf course charging is approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes. So just some information to know about how people are using the one charger we do have in town. Additional costs that right now we're maybe not able to fully cover due to just completely breaking even and not really getting much money back from the revenue includes things like network and software subscriptions. So we use ChargePoint in Westborough for the golf course at least. So paying for that management portal. There's insurance and liability coverage that could be needed. In our case, we did opt in to have that. So that helps in case anything gets damaged by a car backing into something or weather that has coverage for that damage, as well as possible payment processing fees, which could be small but still add up. And then long-termly looking at 10 to 20 years out, if equipment needs major replacement or some other type of charger comes out in the next 25 years and people would like to replace that, that's something to think about as well. So I know that was a lot of information. I just want to break down the next steps of what to do with all of that. The main goal of this presentation is simply to make the school committee aware that this EV charging roadmap was conducted and completed, and the school sites were included in that. Since the roadmap was completed, I'd like to just make you all aware that if if you read the fine print in any of those proposals, it might have said something about, at this time, National Grid Incentives Program has been paused. Right now, it's been resumed. So I just want to add that, that is back up and running. So the funding landscape has changed somewhat. And the town on our end is working on getting updated incentives from Energy Source. So we're currently working on that. Like I said, we did receive some of those back, and they did go up a little bit. But what I'm really looking here for tonight is just to see if there's any interest in pursuing this or getting more information from any school sites identified. If there is any interest in exploring any of these sites, for no cost, like we did at the town side, we could, or you guys could pursue rescoping with Energy Source. Energy Source is just a project expediter who my predecessor worked with a lot for other energy efficiency projects. It just consists of a short visit to one of these sites with the school facilities staff present, and we saw about a 3-week turnaround for proposals coming back with more information. And what was really nice about this was we were able to adjust locations of chargers that we saw to maybe make it more cheaper. So the farther away things are from different energy resources, the more expensive it is to trench. So they're able to work with facilities and other members to figure out maybe a cheaper option for places, maybe reducing the amount of chargers in a location. So finding ways to like update that. And once you're given those updated incentives, I laid out 2 options, but there's a possible third. So you could table this with the proposals given to you by Energy Source for the future. I know it's a lot of money up front, so something to consider down the line. Or you could move forward with the process of applying for a grant for one of these locations if that's of interest to the committee. And a third option, which I thought of later today, was I know it's important to understand the staff opinion at these schools, and if it's actually wanted. There's no point in implementing these chargers if it's not wanted yet by school staff or people in the community. So maybe conducting some type of survey with school teachers and other people who utilize those parking lots to see if it's of interest to them before deciding what to do. Thank you all. Any questions?
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Steve?
Yeah, I have a number of questions, I guess. The first one, who participated from the school department in this study that you brought forward tonight?
Both Tony LeMay and Kelly, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Kelly G. She and those 2 facilities were both in the meetings when I first started.
Well, I was not aware of any of that happening before. However, given that it's done and the information is available, I guess I'd point out at the bottom of your summary table that the net cost to the town, including the school department, is $1.6 million for this proposal against the original cost of $3,085,000. So if you divide the $1.6 million by $3 a gallon, that's 533,000 gallons of fuel. That supposedly is represented by the 29 cents. So what's the delivered cost of electricity in the experience at the country club?
From what Jim has told me, they are not needing to pay any extra for the electricity. So the revenue they're getting from people charging there, they're able to cover fully paying the electricity costs.
So it's a service then?
Yes.
Yeah. So there isn't any benefit in effect other than having an electric system there. My interest in this is to go forward with it in terms of the school committee's policies relative to electric anything, if you will, because there's a quid pro quo here. I don't know the structure of what the rate system is at the country club, but I know what it is at Safe Vale School. And we pay a demand charge on top of the electricity that we use, and it's not insignificant. And I wonder about this system having its own demand charge. And secondarily, is there a separate meter at the country club, or is there, in effect, a general building meter?
So your last question, I don't know. I can ask Jim, ask Jim to get me more information on that. But to your other question about, which I think I was getting at correctly, increasing the cents per kilowatt usage at the schools potentially? Is that what you're referring to?
No, demand charge has to do with how much, what's the maximum peak energy you use in a period.
Oh, yeah.
For example, you may only use an average of, let's say just numbers, 100 kilowatts.
Right.
But when you plug in everything all at the same time, it's like in the morning when you put the stove on and your toaster and everything else, they charge you for what that peak is. And we get whacked at fails, and we paid $400,000 to have the privilege of putting in solar to National Grid. They're nobody's friend.
Right.
And so I guess the background I'm trying to give you here is simply, if it's a good thing for the town and the school department, and it doesn't cost us money, then it's the thing to do. But I will suggest anybody who voted yesterday and went to the high school to do it, did you find it easy to park? No. And in fact, in every school lot during the day, there's very seldom any extra spaces. And in the case of this, there would be dedicated spaces for chargers. So there's a whole bunch of things that has to be worked out here in terms of the, let's say, the benefit to the school department and school employees. Because I think in one of the opening statements, whether it's in this document or another one that was provided to us, basically says that in somebody's opinion that this is a draw from the turnpike. I think that's a little ridiculous. Anybody that wants to drive 4 miles to get here to plug into a charger is going to find something easier and closer. I do think the proposal that provides chargers, and however the town helps to do it, you know, on commercial properties, restaurants, and any other business in town, that because that's where the spot is going to be open for somebody to sit 3 hours on a charger.
Right.
And so, like I said, my interest in doing what has been the town's policy for a while, but not at the detriment to the school department or school employees, and certainly not at the cost to the town. You know, these numbers don't make sense to me, that in fact we want to do that for the benefit of doing it. For the town to shell out $1.6 million for something for which you have to buy the electricity, just, you know, it's not good economics. Maybe it isn't supposed to be, but I think for us, in begging every dollar that we get at town meeting, is a very difficult stance to say that we're going to pay. I think your single chart for the school department was $700 and something thousand for the benefit of these things, for which there were a benefit to the employee. But at this point, given what I know about what our needs are in terms of electric vehicles, you know, they wouldn't serve the purpose. There's not enough of them, say, to run buses and so on. And the other part is, I think there's a warrant article on this warrant that potentially would have all revenues going to the DPW, which also I would not be in favor of, for the simple reason that we have to take care of it over time. And so, and I'm not sure that warrant article applies to the school committee anyway, but so those are all the issues I have. But I think, you know, the merit of the argument is, let's find out. And I'm sure with your help, the school committee can get the help that we need.
I will say it was really helpful to work with Energy Source again, and just, at least for me, be able to meet with someone, and they're really good communicating the costs and helping create transparency with everything. And also, all these sites don't have to ever be proceeded with at once. They can all be taken at one at a time, or just one and never the others, or something like that. So it's not that all 8 of these need to be done. They were just listed there.
And just a quick point of clarification as well. The 750,000, Steve, I think you're referring to, was just for like a single, like for school bus depot, essentially. Like we got charges for the school buses.
No, I was talking about what's in this report right here. Go find the school committees. Actually, she had it on the screen.
I'm just saying that I think that it's the last line, but I don't think that's a total line. That's just like for that one. If we were to,
Look at the right-hand part of that table. I believe that's a summary on the bottom, is it not?
Am I correct that that's not a summary? That's just for the
Line 17.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
It's
that
the
one is-
DPW itself.
Very expensive because that's in case school buses ever want to get electrified, which is it's at the bottom because it's the most expensive. I don't believe on this chart there's an addition of adding up all the net cost of every site total.
Well, on that one, there is a sum total.
Yeah, on this bottom one.
Yep.
Yeah, for municipal and school.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Jane?
Thank you for, it was a nice, clear presentation, so thank you for that. I think some of the questions I have, I don't even know if you would know the answer to, but it's things like, why does the school have to pay for something that's in the parking lot? Does anyone know? Like, are
Well,
we
I-
responsible for the parking lot and
Well-
maintaining it?
Yes, school property, and therefore the budget relative to school property is solely the responsibility of the school committee. Massachusetts state law sets it that way on purpose, so that in fact we can control, quote, the educational experience. I mean, these are devices, just like say a furnace in a building, as part of the same thing. But to the extent that I believe it needs to serve a purpose for schools and the people that work there. If it's a hindrance, then I see it as a problem. And I think yesterday's experience in terms of trying to go to vote is part of it. And these items would occupy space that already is a parking space. And as we saw in the high school, it's also going to require additional requirements based on state law, I would assume. But we can deal with this stuff. We can get there, but I don't think we ought to willy-nilly run into it without knowing the full impact of it. And as I said, our experience with Fails when we built it was a fee to National Grid to pay for the upgrade of wires that supplied the total new energy, which was zero, and we were reversing the energy back out into the system. So, like I said, there's nobody's friend. And any deal that you strike with National Grid is going to be in the benefit of National Grid. So that's my experience. Since I worked there for 25 years, I know exactly what the game plan is.
So I think, thanks, Steve. So I think most of my questions would be worked out after. I mean, they're like nitty gritty, like,
Yeah.
can someone just go and park at Hastings in the middle of the day if there's
Or the
a,
middle of the night.
right. So just, these are the things that I would be concerned about, having a public charging station at the school, but this is not, I
Well,
know
they're-
probably.
Not to interrupt. I spoke a little bit when Crystal from Energy Source came out. She was explaining, we looked at other town sites that were employees for the town would be working at, and some questions were brought up on like different signage to say this charger can be only used or is used for employees only of this location between the hours of blank and blank. So you could do that. And then as long as it's open to the public for a certain amount, I think it has to be at least 12 hours to be also able to get the EVIP grant funding. That has to be made appropriate. And there are also ways you can work with different, if you don't choose to go to ChargePoint or you do, they all are able to work with the facilities to offer, like increase the cents per kilowatt hour to offer benefits to people charging who maybe work for the location. So there's a bunch of other details that you can also get as you dive into this.
Great. So I think that's, I mean, for me, the questions I have would probably be worked out at the next phase. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I would comment that school parking lots are not public property in the sense that anybody can go there. It's under the jurisdiction of the school committee and the school administration for public safety, if nothing else. And in fact, we've had discussions as to how to deal with issues of John Q. Public wandering around high school property, for example.
Right.
And we've seen the impact of not doing that well in other places in the United States. And I hate to see this as the window or the opportunity for something to go totally wrong. So anyway, those are my concerns on this, but I think there is a way, and it's through study. to figure out the pros and cons of what it's all about.
Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
So a few questions, and most of mine are going to be, I think, more so kind of around the finances of it and the funding. So the first one, I know that it can be hard to say, to try to judge what the legislature is going to do over in Boston. But with the state grant, with the Mass EVIP, do you know, has that already been funded for a certain amount of years, or is that kind of on a year-by-year basis?
Good question. I asked the same question today to Crystal from Energy Source. So it started 5 years ago, the pool of money. There's been long-term people who have been adding to like reimburse this pool of money. There's no expected date as to which like the pool of money will go away. But she would be the person who would have a sense like if it's depleting.
And so it sounds like that this isn't funded by the state every year, or this isn't funded by like the state budget process. This is something that like the utility companies are paying into for like different incentives. Like, is that right?
I can send you the document that shows like exactly how they're getting their funding, the Mass EVIP, and I had to do some digging on that today. But to my knowledge, it's not dependent on just state. Yeah.
I think that does answer my question. Thank you. And so relating to, the revenues that you showed at the golf course, very much appreciate you including that. I think that's very helpful. I will say though, I want to clarify, like this is revenue, right? Not profit. So this is just like the amount, like just the base amount that it was taking in, like regardless of like how much it costs to produce that energy. Is that right?
I believe so. Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I very much appreciate that we have this, and I think it's very valuable to, have a roadmap and to have that laid out. To Steve's point, and to your point as well, talking about, I don't know if necessarily a survey is the best way. I don't know what is, but I think that I would want to see just like some kind of gauge that there is going to be a need for this, because, I don't think that we should be doing it willy-nilly. But, my concern is less about the couple parking spaces, because from what I understand, people can still park there regardless. But it's more so about that, like, it seems like it would fund itself. It would pretty much be at cost, except for some of these other items here. And then like potentially in 10 years, if we do have to replace it. And so like, I think it can be a good for the town, potentially, if we're talking about other people using it, good for the teachers. But like, it sounds like that will be, a good we provide at a long-term cost. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah?
So I just wanted to go back on one of the points you made. So you said in order to qualify for the grant, you have to have 12 hours of public, for an opportunity for public usage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, is a challenge for me. I think that I would not really support something that would require or allow for, because I would imagine it would be open. It is open, but overnight. And I think that would cause potential security issues. There would have to be more maintenance on our side in terms of trying to, make sure that we're, having troopers in the parking lot checking it out. I wouldn't love that. I am, on the other hand, I am in favor of, I think that if this is somewhat of a potential revenue source, not directly, but it serves itself, I think that it would be a good thing to have in town. I think most people who have these vehicles also have the capacity to, they've altered whatever they have for wiring in their homes,
Right.
and they're charging at home.
Yeah.
So when it comes to our staff, I think that it would only really be applicable for those who are coming from far, because there's only a certain distance that it's going to cover. So I'm not sure that the need is there. I do think that it's probably worth exploring with the teachers via survey or whatnot to find out if it's something that they would even be interested in. But I'm just not sure that really the schools are an appropriate place for this, or that there's a need for it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it right now.
Yeah. And I will get more information about overnight access with schools from her as well, because I might be misunderstanding that open to the public, meaning, 12 hours during the daytime, as long like people who come for meetings or people who are picking up a parent coming for some type of meeting and they're using the charger, if that qualifies as public access, because that's a good concern to have.
Yeah, it is. I just wouldn't feel comfortable that we'd be inviting people into the lodge
Right.
for that purpose. It's one thing if we've got people there conducting business in the schools and they're charging meanwhile. But again, need-wise, I just feel if we're talking specifically about the schools and staff and kids, they're not traveling, most of them are not traveling far distances, and I'm not so sure that this is something that's going to be beneficial.
Something to say?
Hi, Jeff Levine, Sustainable Westborough. If I could just put in a couple of comments related to what you just mentioned. First of all, we do have some data that indicates there are, not just in Westborough, but in surrounding towns, there are quite a few apartment dwellers who don't necessarily have home charging. So I did want to point that out. In addition, I have heard from other towns that the way they deal with the off-hour access is they do have split hours. So they allow early morning before school starts and after hours, but not necessarily nighttime hours after school ends. So that's another way you could get to the 12 hours without allowing nighttime access. So wanted to offer that as another point of view.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, parking lots aren't the best and safest place as it is, and I would worry that after school hours is when we have the least amount of staff on site. And so if we've got kids there for sports or whatever, especially here in December at 4:30 when sundown is there, it would just be a concern for me. Not that I don't, I mean, I think we just have to monitor it more. That's a little bit more of a burden on the
Yep.
schools.
I'll try to find out also what other schools maybe have done in the past, other towns.
Anybody else?
No.
Well, first of all, I just want to express the joy of seeing a former Westborough student here. I'm always happy when we have someone like you present and
Thank
present
you.
as well as you did. I thought the presentation was very good. I like that you presented the potential benefits, but it was measured with the potential cost, and you seem to be very open-minded. I appreciate that. I have a few extra questions. Can you say what was the criteria for determining that a site has a high priority?
So there was really no criteria, which is why it was a little complicated in the beginning. Power options before, and I wasn't here in the very beginning of this process, but to what I've been told was they really just looked primarily at what was the most expensive and what was the cheapest. First started there by putting the most expensive at the bottom, cheapest at the top, and then having conversations with people like Sustainable Westborough members who are from Westborough. Obviously, Power Options, they had no idea how our town works and everything. We were able to tell them, oh, this field never gets used, or this parking lot actually never gets used, or we think we see a lot of usage here. And then through that, they were able to go back and edit it. But it was really location, cost, and then through conversations that we had with people at Power Options is how we got to this priority. And it really does not, I want to just make it clear that the priorities are not super strong to the location. So if you see something as a higher priority that's listed as medium, to take kind of these priorities as a grain of salt as Power Options. This is a preliminary study that they did. And whatever the committee sees as really a priority is the most important.
Thank you. I actually, before I should have asked the first question. I'm missing. I feel like we're describing a potential solution. I'm not sure. I'm clear. Maybe that's what Jane was alluding to. What is the overall objective? Is there a problem with people not being able to charge the cars? Are we trying to increase the convenience for the residents? Is it meeting some policy expectations? What is driving this desire to install these stations?
Do you know why Ben chose to do this?
Fred Lenard, Community Development Director for the town. So what this investigation was, if you go back in history, is that the town originally started just doing kind of a point and shoot method. That's how we ended up at the golf course. So this was the first attempt to look at the overall community from a scientific standpoint to see what made sense to actually put chargers in. So part of that was to look at all the school sites. So if you go back to what's high and low, some of that went to the practicality of putting the chargers in. So whether there was actually a location of power sources at those locations, did it make sense? So is there an overall driving force for the whole town to do that? No, it's just kind of the concept that we're looking to be climate leaders. We're looking to electrify as long-term goes on. So it's how to do this on a more scientific basis. So that's kind of that was the impetus to do this. Keeping in mind that This wasn't an easy thing to do from the first part because there's very few, if any, communities that have done this from a scientific standpoint to actually get a company to come in and survey the whole town and look at the spots and see how realistic they were. So this was the first attempt to do that. So between Community Sustainable Westborough, in conjunction with town staff, that's what the impetus was for this. There's no specific thing that said we had to do it.
Okay,
so-
understood. Is it also maybe perhaps driven by the timeline of the grants?
Well, so that goes back to how you look at these. There are municipal sites we'll also investigate, and that'll go to select board to look for that approval. So as I said, it's not something that'll happen overnight. So the grants will, and practically will probably change as time goes on. So the next step is, if the school board was willing to do this, is to get more finite information to get a better estimate of what those costs would be. So that would be that step.
Thank you. I have a few more questions. Are you aware of any school districts that have installed these kind of chargers on their properties?
I know the Natick school system has. I haven't been able to get in touch yet with other sustainability coordinators to see what their approach was to this, but I don't, like Fred was saying, know of any schools or towns that did this type of comprehensive report. So any schools that did, I think, just decided on their own to implement them, but it's still a goal of mine to get in contact with those towns and then report some feedback if that would be wanted.
That'd be very helpful.
Yeah.
And last question I have, I'm mostly concerned about the Hastings spot. I feel like Hastings has the biggest crunch as far as parking. And you mentioned that there are ADA requirements. So if you were to put well, anywhere, I guess, this EV charger, that would eliminate how many current spots?
That's a good question. So say, for example, if there were only 2 spots that we were looking at, if we needed one to also be wide enough for an ADA, it would technically be 3. And you'd need to do restriping of those 3 spots to widen one and kind of restripe the usual consistent spots that we see. So technically, you'd add an extra spot onto each. So if this one is 2 stations with 4 ports, that's 4 parking spots. Unless I haven't been to this location like recently in the parking lot to see if there's an ADA compliant spot there already. But in most cases, you'd have to restripe and kind of take an extra spot.
Right.
There were some spots where there was already present a handicap or ADA compliant spot, so we didn't need to do take away an extra spot, if you will.
Thank you. I think any other questions?
I guess I get one other fact. When we designed Fail School, we designed it for a charger, a 2 position charger. In fact, we have the design in hand. We have the specifications to build it. So at this point, to the extent that the school department was going to do anything, I would think that's the source. The second benefit potentially would be that we're making our own energy. And so to the extent that we had excess energy during the day relative to solar, the benefit should be to the school department. So those are things that are already in place that could be beneficial, I guess, to this process. And so we're ready to go to buy one based on specifications that were created by our engineers. The question is all the other things that I asked in terms of what's the impact. We know that we pay a penalty as part of the demand charge based on the way the meter works at Fails. I assume every other school meter is the same way. So that's information to learn. If it's not a financial impact on the school department, then that might be the place to try.
Well, thank you very much. I would encourage you to respond to all these questions with an email, and perhaps there'll be other questions following after that.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, the next item on the agenda are our discussion items. And the first discussion item is the medication policy.
I wanted to note that Judy Noonan, who originally I thought was not going to be available, is here this evening. If people have any questions, I know we looked at this last time. You've had some time to review and to reach out to her individually if you needed any further information, but I will leave it to you.
I think we can first get the motion. Can I get a motion for this?
Motion to approve the medication policy.
Second.
You get a second. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Then let's get to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Motion passed. Thank you very much. We're moving to the next discussion item, the annual town meeting warrant articles.
I appreciate Judy being here, and she got to observe a very exciting school committee meeting. So thank you to Judy for all her work on this with the nurses as a team as well. And what I may ask, if you don't mind, is just to get a signature on this so I can hand it to her before she leaves, because she would be very excited to do this. So hand that down to the chair. Do you need a pen?
A red pen.
Okay,
I got a blue one.
I've got a black one.
You'd rather have black?
Thank you very much. I feel like that's the benefit of being here. Give her a folder too. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate that. Great.
Okay. As I mentioned, the next item is the annual town meeting warrant articles.
I think we had initially decided to put these on the agenda just in case there was any final discussion that the school committee wanted to have this evening prior to town meeting, which will be the next time we meet as a group officially. Everything here will be, almost everything here is under a different kind of umbrella article, with the exception of the borrowing article for the A and B wing. So we will need to plan to have someone from the committee who makes that motion. So I wanted to point that out. And, you know, I also just wanted to see if there was any interest in the committee in speaking to any of the articles other than the budget, which I will do a brief presentation on. I'll be prepared to talk about the A and B wing roof, as well as the operational efficiency study. Christy and I are going to collaborate on that, and the transfer property. I can be prepared to speak on anything, but if there's anyone here who wants to speak, we can kind of coordinate. I thought I'd throw that out for you.
Well, to the extent it's needed, I'd be willing to speak on the A and B roof article. I think all the other ones are free cash, and I think they speak for themselves, particularly if you've read the text.
Yes.
If anything was needed on any of the others, I'd be happy to do that too. But like I said, they're offered in different places, or as Allison said, they're offered in different places. And I believe they're supported by both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. So I would find it unusual, other than answering some simple question, that anybody would have to do anything for these.
Any other comments?
I had one question. Was there a grant on the Hastings playground?
Yes.
That's this community preservation plan. That is the, I think that's the question that you're asking.
Yeah.
And that funding is basically helping us to increase other funding. So essentially, we went out to get that this year, even knowing we won't spend it until probably the summer of 27 at the earliest, in part so that we had it in hand and could advocate for additional funds with additional grant organizations. And it's also a thing where it gives us a little more time to look at how that fits into the project of solving some of the issues around the parking lot. So, you know, the property the property transfer is in the mix there as well. So it's a piece of a complicated puzzle, is how I would describe it.
So does it come into play with this ask at all, or no? For this year's town meeting, the 11B.
11B, it will be-
disconnected from that.
I think that's what it is.
I think that's what it is.
This is the grant?
This is the $150,000.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Want me to
Yeah.
read the article?
No, I see the
So
article.
actually,
I think, and it's probably will be in your presentation, but will be important that you emphasize that it was a grant.
Yeah. Yeah. It's grants, yes, sort of. I mean, it's taxpayer dollars that have already been paid and now redistributed through the Community Preservation Fund. So that's, it's been accumulating over, I'm not sure when it was established. Anita?
Established 2 years ago. Okay. So what's going to happen during town meeting is that they have 3 other funding projects on the warrant. So they're going to go through all 3 of them, and the school department is asking for the $150,000 for the playground.
Okay.
So it's one of several projects. There are a couple of requirements. There are recreation, open space, and historical preservation are sort of the 3 different areas where these monies can be expended. And so essentially it's, as opposed to a grant from an outside organization or a private foundation, this is money that the town has already set aside to do this type of work.
Okay. I think I misunderstood that it was an in-town grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
my only comment to this, actually, I was going to speak to 18B myself, to 11B myself, is that the title of it might be misleading to some people, meaning that it's a replacement and that's enough. That this is going towards the replacement. It's not enough for the replacement.
Yes.
And that would be a clarification that's probably warranted on the floor.
Yeah.
Right.
We can make sure that that's clear with anything that happens. I think that is, I think folks' sense of scale, it's hard to say it out loud, but things are very expensive now, including playgrounds.
So perhaps it'll be good to mention, what is approximate cost of doing that.
Absolutely. So,
Well, I think the way that would come up is that someone would rise from the floor and say, wait a minute, 2 years ago or last year, I can't remember which one, you guys asked for $600,000
Right.
for a complete playground replacement. And at that point, I think we rise in answer to that question, which is yes, and we realized last year that that's a difficult ask. And so now it's been parsed into a number of years over time. And in fact, in this particular year, it's coming out of one of the already set aside funds for the purposes like this, which I think, would help, and particularly since it's a majority vote rather than 2/3 vote, which 600,000 would probably turn into
I
a
have a
borrow.
comment. So Allison, were you not planning when you give the presentation around that to talk about how it's going towards it? Because I would prefer that the whole conversation be had and be transparent rather than waiting for somebody to ask the question, because it seems as though we're not coming clean with something. So if you could.
I'll be prepared to do that. That's, if the rhythm of how that goes, because those are CPC articles, I'll be
Yeah,
curious.
the way this would probably be presented is, under 11, okay, which has got multiple pieces.
Right.
The moderator will ask, are there any questions on any of these articles? If there's no question, then it'll take a vote on it without having anybody explain anything, because it's obvious what it says, except for the point that Yakub brought. So it includes, a few different things,
I guess
all the way down to item D.
I am sort of planning on having kind of a handout ready for town meeting that includes sort of, and I think this was done, I had slides last year, but in prior years, there was sort of a one-pager, and my hope was to have snapshots of each of the articles to give some context so people understood everything that had anything to do with the schools, and had that in hand as well. So
I'd also add that you might also use the communication with the parents, in preparation for the town meeting, and mention that as well.
of course,
That's a good idea.
yes, that's on my, yep. That'll be coming soon.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, citizen request. Is there anybody here?
I keep waiting one of these days, Gretchen.
Okay, we move on to the school committee reports. Steve?
Yeah, I guess my only comment is a follow-up on what I've mentioned earlier, which is the inability to, when we have school on the same day that we have an election, it's really tough, for people to find there's no place to park at the high school, and that isn't going to change as long as there is school. I would certainly think that we might ask the election commission to consider having the polls at the recreation building, where there's plenty of parking, acres of parking, where that issue wouldn't be in play.
You mean at the community center?
Yes.
My understanding is that when that center was proposed and as it's kind of being filled out and developed, that was actually part of a part of a plan, part of a conversation. I have put that back on the radar at a couple junctures to say the schools it would be very helpful for us if that happened for a number of reasons. And particularly in the case of a large national election with a lot of traffic, we have in the past had professional development on those days in order to kind of mitigate some of the impact. But that is not by choice. That's not a preferred professional development day for us. We would much prefer to do that at a different time if we could. So I think being able to make that shift would be wonderful operationally from the school department. And I know there is interest in making that shift on the town side as well. There are a couple things that need to get ironed out, but I suspect that's something we can really work toward.
So in the interim, what can we do to make 20 spaces available in the high school parking lot for elections? Can we earmark some of those spots that the kids have, or can we do something for the voting public?
It's a great question. I will take it up with the high school folks and see if we can figure something out.
I understand that, what it means on that day or that afternoon, that something has to change in the high school parking lot, which
Right.
is not going to be
Not easy,
a
but
happy camper at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it is something that we should try to do as a benefit of the electorate. So, let's see what the study could tell us.
sure. Yeah, let's see what we can figure out.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Nothing to report.
Tim?
Nothing to report.
Sarah?
Today I have the privilege, and I have been for the past 3-4 years, of being a presenter for the Religion Symposium at Mill Pond, which has really been nice. I was able to do that for the past few years, and they had representatives from the Sikh faith, Hinduism, Lutheranism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So it was very nice. I think the kids, I think that's such a great thing that they do every year. They introduce the kids to all these religions, and they make it very fun. The kids love it. They ask some excellent questions. Sometimes it's quite thought-provoking what they ask, and we kind of, especially in the first part of the forum, we're all sitting there, and there's these questions that the teams had all come up with in advance, and I think all of us sometimes feel taken aback. We don't even want to answer some of the questions because they're quite deep, and so we try and keep it on the surface if we can and make them all feel comfortable. But it's really amazing to see the kind of the participation we have from the students, the teachers' work in terms of getting them in and out of these 10-minute sessions, and it's really fun. So that was a great opportunity today, and I really think I encourage that we have this type of thing at all the schools in some way, shape, or form. I think that it's a wonderful educational opportunity for them. So,
Thank you. Jerry?
We have a couple things to share. So, first of all, Armstrong Elementary School is going to be holding an art show on Wednesday, March 25th from 6:30 to 8, containing artwork from students, which I think is pretty cool. Then Fales Elementary School is also organizing a glow disco dance on Friday, March 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. in the gymnasium. And more information can be found on Parent Square. I do remember that they said that the recommended donation was $5 and that chaperones were required. Additionally, the Gibbons Middle School Spring Dance is being held this Friday on March 13th, and next Monday, March 16th, will be the last day for current 8th graders to finalize their course selection for next year at Westborough High School. Then another cool thing that's been going on in the district is that our district has partnered with the Massachusetts Attorney General and the Massachusetts Stop Grant to organize Start With Hello assemblies from the Sandy Hook Promise Organization. And so they've been organizing these assemblies for kids in Mill Pond up through the high school from grade 6 through 12 and teaching them about kindness, empathy, identity, and self-esteem, among other issues. And I think that was a good way to kind of teach kids about how to, I don't know, just treat others with respect and kind of build a better and more inclusive and welcoming community. Then lastly, this Saturday, the Westborough Environmental Action Fair is going to be at the high school from 1 to 4 p.m.
Thank you, Jerry. For my own report, just want to say a few words about the budget reporting subcommittee that Steve and I are part of. We had one meeting with the administration, which was in the early exploratory stages, looking at other towns, how they do reporting, trying to figure out proposals for the new policy. It will take some time before we figure this out. I just want to update the committee on the work that just started. Okay. We have 2 action items. We already took care of the medication policy. So the first one will be the contract for the educational support professionals, no longer paraprofessionals.
And that was one of the terms of the contract negotiation. And that actually ESP is a term that has gained favor widely throughout the state and actually the country. So it's an updated term for them.
I'm going to have to learn that.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the contract for ESPs.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So for the discussion, I just want to add one comment. I have a conflict of interest. My wife is a educational support professional at Mill Pond, and I will be abstaining from this vote. Any other discussion?
So I was just going to talk about this a little bit. So I was on that negotiating team, as was Jane. I think that I want to say that they all came very, they put their best foot forward. I think it was a very, it went really well. I was really pleased with the way that those negotiations went. I think everybody was very reasonable in the asks, and I'm really happy that we were able to wrap it up so nicely and relatively quickly, I think. So. Yeah.
Okay. No other discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Abstained. 4-0-1. Motion passed.
Throw a moment of thanks to the committee members who sat on those. It's a lot of time and a lot of kind of going into the details of things, and I think the outcome is going to be great for the district, as well as for the ESPs themselves. I think the restructuring of some of the things will allow us to be a little more competitive in terms of hiring into certain types of positions, and I think that's going to be a real game changer for some of our classrooms in particular. So thank you.
Quick follow-up question. So with respect to that, some of this is going to impact the community in terms of the tiering and stuff. That's
yes.
good. So how is that communication going to be
how is that kind of
going out
rolling
to the
out?
families? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it may not, in terms of families, I don't know that it's something that's going to be very obvious or visible on the outside, because I think a lot of people are kind of exactly where they're going to be. So
Okay.
I doubt there'll be major shifts. We may see a few, but I think it's going to be pretty stable, actually.
Right. I do think, though, that it would be very beneficial for the families to know that there's so many additional requirements that we're going to have as far as training is concerned.
In terms of, training and support.
So what we're really targeting and being very careful about the placement. So.
Yes. Great. We can do that.
Thank you. The next vote we have are the minutes from our previous meeting from February 25th. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0-0, motion passed. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
500. Thank you.